So first of all, just want to clear up exactly which version this is. There's a lot of discussion among all the Wicker Man fan groups. And this is actually, it's not the long version, which is the original director's cut, but the middle version. Is that right?
Well, the nomenclature of it is puzzles me too, frankly. I could spend the next 5 minutes telling you all the versions without being able to name them probably accurately. Well, this version is the version that I like.
Okay.
It contains all the really important scenes, sequences to make the story work, I think. It contains some afterthoughts, which I think most directors have about films they've made. Oh God, I wish I didn't have that particular, scene in it. I didn't do it very well, or it was a mistake in the first place. In this case, the film was originally written to start on the mainland, and it originally had a plane arriving, and the pilot, i.e. the sergeant, who is the main protagonist, landing and having a dialogue with another cop. And actually it's fairly boring and doesn't really advance the story. And the main purpose of it is to try and show that the sergeant, who is our protagonist, is a bit of a prig, not a ordinary good guy. He's very sort of got a poker up,
Yeah.
And so, but we establish that throughout the film, so we don't really need to have a sequence, before the film starts, really, in a sort of atmosphere which was rather sort of standard police station, television.
Yeah.
And so, and this isn't television; it's a feature.
Exactly.
So we've cut that out. Otherwise, and that's my decision. Otherwise, it's the film as we originally intended it.
Okay, great. Well, that's definitely true about Inspector Howie's kind of comically uptight way of living and the way he views things. And that definitely goes through in the whole film. And to me, contrasting with the way the pagans behave, with their free love and all the dancing, it seems obvious for me personally to side with the pagans. Was that your intention? And following on from that, have you ever been accused of maybe promoting paganism or of painting modern Christianity in this kind of, in mocking it slightly? Or?
Well, I think that if you were talking from the Christian point of view, you might be accused of overdoing resisting his vulnerability rather bravely, because those Christians would have had that kind of mockery launched at them too in a similar kind of way. And also, in a more general sense, I think the people who have very, very strong beliefs, so that it affects the whole way they conduct their lives, tend to be subject to mockery in our freer society these days. So I think it's true to type, the kind of type we want to show him to be. And of course, he's a stronger character than his type. I like to think that he develops in our view. So at the end we can see, his heroism. And that's all the more interesting if you didn't see it at the beginning. If you just saw him as possibly a bit of a tight ass, at the beginning. But then you realize the enormous courage he has to show at the end. And he's given the respect of that, for that, I should say, by Lord Summerisle. And he even challenges Lord Summerisle brilliantly by saying, if your crops fail next year, you'll be, in the same position as me. In other words, better order another Wicker Man. So I think that Christianity actually gets a fair crack of the whip in this. When we showed this in the Bible Belt in the United States, where they're very fundamentalist Christians, we were very afraid that they would really hate the film. Quite the reverse. We had sort of prayer breakfasts organized by the distributors, and we'd meet with a whole bunch of ministers and priests for breakfast. It's a very American thing, prayer breakfast, and discuss the film, they having had a screening. And they were very, very for the film because they said it actually represented Christianity as accurately, the sense of belief in resurrection and so on, that they had ever seen in another film. Therefore, recommended it from the pulpit.
Amazing. You mentioned Lord Summerisle, and his Christopher Lee's character, Lord Summerisle, that's always one that really interested me because of sort of what you were bringing up there, that his faith seems quite ambiguous at times. He makes these scientific speeches almost, and then at the other hand he makes his people burn a guy in the name of his faith. I wonder if you see him as a sort of conscious manipulator of his people, and whether that manipulative power of religion over society is something that interests you, particularly maybe in a modern context.
Answer the last part of the question
Yes.
first. Yes, it does interest me, and I think there's a lot of it about. I think if you see politicians or CEOs of big companies justifying why they do actually dreadful things which are covered with sort of some cosmetics, you have the same sort of person that he is in his rather strange surroundings. I think he is Lord Ambiguous, there's no question of that. But I think what makes him more endearing is he so enjoys his role. He's having a lot of fun being a kind of magus. And I don't think that he is entirely without justification either, because when he describes how his grandfather, who had introduced the idea of turning this otherwise barren island into a fertile, fruit farm, he was actually taking the local people out of rather miserable conditions into a quite fruitful life, and also by introducing his particular version of paganism, making life much more fun.
That's for sure.
So they were quite happy to get rid of the ministers.
Well, I've got to ask you about the third in this trilogy, because of course Wicker Man is the first, then you had the Wicker Tree in 2011. So with the third one, where are you with that? Can you tell us about the plans with that?
I'm at the moment I have a screenplay. I've partly cast it. Okay. I know where some of the locations are. I'm probably about 2/3 of the way financing it.
Okay, and that's the Wrath of the Gods, it's called.
The Wrath of the Gods, yes.
Uh-huh.
And it's really where the gods get their comeuppance.
Okay.
The gods have had it very easy in the first two films. In the last film, the conceit is that this is, it doesn't really matter whether you get it or not get it. I mean, it's important, I think, if you play this kind of game with the audience, that it doesn't matter whether they get it or don't get it. I mean, somebody who's never heard of Wagner, I hope, will enjoy the film.
Okay.
But it is set very, very roughly, and with a certain amount of tongue-in-cheek, in the last act of the ring cycle, Gotterdammerung, and the Wrath of the Gods is a sort of kind of translation of that. And the gods get their comeuppance in this particular film, and I think it's a suitable ending to the trilogy.
Is it going to be in part in music, like the other ones, telling the story with music?
Yes, and the last opera in the or the last part of the ring cycle operas is populated by two really important characters. One is Siegfried, and the other one is Brunhilde. And it's a sort of love story that's gone wrong, and it involves the gods who've been meddling in human beings' lives, getting, as I said, their comeuppance. Mm-hmm. But musically, as in most of his operas, each major figure has their own tune, as it were. And in this case, we will take the kind of liberties with the music that we have in the previous two films. Mm-hmm. For instance, the Rhine maidens, who are sirens, really, wicked ladies who tempt innocent people into their orbit. They come across a little bit like the Andrews sisters, if you know who the Andrews sisters were.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
So those games with the music will be played as well. I mean, they won't all hark back to that particular period. Some of them can be absolutely up to the minute pop. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, they've got to fit the characters that they go with very well. But the carapace, as it were, the brackets in which the entire film will be, are Wagnerian. In other words, it starts with a great, huge Wagnerian flourish, and it ends with the same.
Okay.
Well, with a different one, but the end.
Thank you very much.
Is that what you wanted?
Yes, for sure. And it's been a pleasure. I'm a big fan of the film, as everybody else is, I'm sure. But yeah.